Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the world's worst living conductor, Roger Norrington. And he has redone, because he did them once before, oh God, was that bad, Haydn's London Symphonies, all 12 of the little suckers. And actually, this set is much better played than his previous set, but it's just as vile and incompetent when it comes to interpretation. And that's so exciting, because if you happen to be unfortunate enough to hear these god-awful disasters, oh, boy, will you have things to tell your grandchildren. What is the problem? Well, I could read the booklet notes. Those are always fun, where Norrington says, well, we want to present Haydn in the way he would have heard his symphonies. He didn't hear anything even remotely like this. First of all, the only thing that Haydn would have admired about these wretched performances is the fabulous playing of the Stuttgart Radio Symphony Orchestra. They're super. They really are, especially at the insane tempos that Norrington chooses. I'm sure Haydn's jaw would have been like, oh, wow, that's amazing. But that's modern. There was no period instrument orchestra that could play these symphonies at this level of executional speed and virtuosity in Haydn's day. That, goes without saying. More to the point, the issue is not whether Haydn would have heard something that these people do. The issue is whether Haydn would have liked something that these people do. And on that account, I think the answer is a big negative. Absolutely negative, because, as I have pointed out many times before, the one thing that Haydn never had to deal with all of the period instruments, you could have gut strings and clay bassoons and wooden trumpets and timpani with cowhides that are still on the cow, as if that's what you want. You can do anything you want. But the one thing Haydn never had to deal with was an egomaniacal fraud of a conductor. And that is what he has to deal with here. I mean, Roger Norrington is just about the biggest phony in the business. He is so obviously narcissistic and so into mucking about with this music. You know, I don't even know where to begin to describe how bad it is. But I do have some samples. Samples not that I'm going to play you from here. I could, actually, but I don't think it's necessary. I wrote a totally independent review on ClassicsToday.com, totally separate, in writing, with some samples. Go listen to it if you feel like it, if you're an insider member. If you're not, then you'll get all you need from this. Trust me. First of all, he messes around with string phrasing. I'm not even going to get into the vibrato issue, because we never get to that level. It's so bad that even if they use tons of appropriate vibrato, it would still sound horrible. Why? Because there are two kinds of articulation in these performances. There is incredibly short and staccato, and with no sense of melodic continuity at all, because even when a melody is played staccato, it's supposed to sound like the notes have some sort of logical sequence, but not here. And then it's either that or this really weird, oily, slick legato. And also with those, the feminine endings at the end of phrases, all of the other irritating mannerisms the period instrument people do, they're all here too. But the string phrasing is so weird. And it's particularly weird at the tempos that Norrington goes at. I mean, he's flying by so quickly, but when you play the music with this sort of glutinous phrasing at that speed, it doesn't go anywhere. It's like, as I said, it's like a hamster on a treadmill, And Haydn didn't write a hamster symphony, but I think we could do it here. Let's look at the ones that don't have nicknames. Number 93, it's the hamster. Number 97, the rat. Number 98, the gerbil. 98 is particularly bad. Oh my God. 98's the one you may recall that has the little piano solo at the end. The whole point of that coda with the cute little piano solo is that it's actually faster than anything that comes before. It's a whirlwind coda. It's not a whirlwind coda in terms of tempo indications. Actually, the tempo is slower, but the notation is quicker because the note values are shorter. But Norrington doesn't seem to notice that. He does the finale with so that when you get to the coda, which is actually supposed to be even more exciting, it's actually at half speed, and it sounds terrible. It's all wrong. It's demonstrably wrong. It's clearly wrong. So the string articulation is horrible and just terrible. But what really blows these performances, what really makes the bite the biggie, is the fact that Norrington does all of the slow movements at practically double speed. And I mean that. And it just destroys them. I mean, some of these symphonies have nicknames based on their slow movements. You know, the surprise, the clock, the military. But at these tempos, I mean, the surprise symphony is dum bum 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 ba dum 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 bang. There's no surprise. Because a loud bang in the middle of an allegro isn't terribly surprising. You need to prepare the surprise. You need to lull people into a state of somnolescence and then give them a shock. There's no shock here. There's no shock. It's just annoying. Or the clock symphony. Holy crap. It doesn't sound anything like a clock. Here, I happen to have set my little electronic metronome at the exact speed that Norrington uses. So here is his clock. I mean, what clock do you know that sounds like this? Da da dum bum ba da da dum ba 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 da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba da ba dum ba dum ba dum ba doo ba doo ba da ba da ba da. Horrible. There's nothing clock-like. And when you don't have a clock-like sound, the music has no sense of humor. It's supposed to have this droll sense of humor, this lazy tune that's going chunk, 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 chunk underneath. That's what makes it funny. But there's no room for humor here. None. It's just it's the cockroach symphony. It sounds like a bug. It's just terrible. And then, oh my God, the military. The military. I can play you a sample of the military because I happen to have done this symphony a million times. And so here is a sample of the military movement from the military symphony. Really military, right? It has no excitement. There's no feeling. I mean, it's pictorial music. Remember the review about it's the call to arms, the retreat, the charge, the clash of forces rising to a climax of horrid sublimity. Well, horrid this is. Sublime? I don't think so. It's just wretched. And if you want a really fast, insane military symphony, there's always Scherchen. I mean, there's Scherchen or Harnoncourt, who's great in this movement. You know, the period instrument people, you would think, would understand that, it's the military movement. Go nuts on it. Go crazy. Make it as graphic as you possibly can. Norrington is just obsessed with his own formula. It's one size fits all music making. All of the slow movements are way too fast. All of the string articulation is too staccato or too legato. All of the finales are fleet as can be, marvelously played. I have to stress, the orchestra sounds terrific doing it. But the biggest disappointment in this for me was Symphony Number 102, because 102 doesn't have a nickname. I mean, maybe in this case it should. It's the chipmunk. Something that zips around quickly on a treadmill. But this Symphony Number 102, it's really the most Beethovenish thing that Haydn wrote. It's a big, loud, dramatic, dynamic symphony. Oddly enough, even though there's, period trumpets and drums that cut through the texture nicely and all that stuff, the performance is so anemic. It's so small scale because Norrington is too busy micromanaging the thing. He's got the stupid little dynamic things, and he's got the strings pipping along, and the slow movement. One of the most beautiful things that Haydn ever wrote, with muted trumpets and drums and the gorgeous solo cello. Oh, well, here, forget that. It's yeah. And it's a largo or an adagio or something like that. How does he get away with this crap? And of course, these are live recordings, so the audience applauds after the end, to their perpetual shame. They're being polite, I understand, and the sound is very good, but holy cow, Haydn, this is not. This is just bad music making, and it is a tragedy that nobody calls him on it. I don't understand it. Why don't people just say to this man, give it up? You suck. What you're doing is atrocious. When his Beethoven cycle came out, some of you may recall, on ClassicsToday.com, I gave that a 10. I was very, very impressed with the fact that the orchestra was able to realize his conception as well as they did. And there, the slow movements were too quick as well. But it didn't rise to this level of absurdity. It really didn't. You could argue with the interpretations, but there was a certain logical sense to them, and they were really extremely well realized of their type. So I'm willing to go along with him. I really am, up to a point. But he's done these symphonies more than once now. His first ones with the London classical players were just shabby all around. And to do them again, and to do them like this, and to just be so damn unmusical. What does it take to get this man to realize some of the character that's built into the music? There is no sense here that he understands that he's playing Haydn, as he did more when he was doing Beethoven. Haydn has his own character, his own idiom, his own syntax, and Norrington doesn't give a damn about any of it. All he wants to do is feed the music into his little formula, let the gears go around, and out comes the same old stuff. One symphony after another. It is such a slog to get through this. You listen to one of them, the first one, and you're like, oh, it's quick, it's exciting, maybe it's going to be great. Then you listen to the surprise, and it's like, And then you listen to 95, and it's like, It just gets worse and worse and worse, because it gets to be the same. It's like 12 identical symphonies with no differentiation between them. Just terrible. Absolutely terrible. And so if you want to go read my ClassicsToday.com review and hear a bit of the clock, how bad it is, be my guest. Otherwise, I think you have all the information you need to make sure to avoid these like death. They are just terrible in every possible way, and several impossible ways. It's just such a pity. I don't understand why Haydn always gets the short end of the stick. There are so many crappy Haydn performances. And one of the reasons it's really fascinating, I think, is that he doesn't actually work on period instruments. I think he was even more forward-looking than Beethoven was in a lot of ways, in his conception of sonority, in his handling of instrumental mass. I think he sounds fabulous on modern instruments, not because they're modern, but because the idiom itself requires a certain weight of tone, a certain kind of boldness of articulation, and a lack of affectation. There just has to be naturalness in everything that you do. And Haydn was very forward thinking, I think. I don't know. I could be wrong. There are some superb Haydn period instrument performances of the London symphonies. For example, Nick McGagan's are marvelous, absolutely fabulous. Some of Thomas Fye's have been fabulous. Some of Harnoncourt's have been fabulous. I'm not denying the possibility. Franz Bruggen, who I think has probably the best series of London symphonies going on period instruments. I have no issue with doing these things on period instruments. But my point is that no matter what kind of instrument you use, you still have to play Haydn. You have to make it sound like Haydn. I do not want to hear the Norrington London symphonies. God, no. I want to hear the Haydn London symphonies. And that's not what this is. For shame, SWR music. You can do better. You should do better. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.